money goes back to support native creatives. I put people, I get, like native illustrators to work on projects and to do, graphic design for us. That money comes from us back into our community. And that is, I think, that re-education piece. That's all I wanted to add to that. Thanks.
That's fantastic. Someone made a point on the chat about putting in $2 billion investment in natural technology. So yes, we can all point to the
money goes back to support native creatives. I put people, I get.
Texas, I built transmission lines out there. I would just stop to get gas and go to the bathroom. But from Del Rio to Vernon, Texas, people are forgotten. And until they need to bring in a wind farm or gas pipeline, and those people are very talented and they are truly part of us decolonizing the current state of startups, especially when it comes to technology.
That's fantastic, Michelle. This is also a conversation with the chat, so let's check that as well. Opening up to other questions from the larger group, pretty much yours. Everyone's jumping out in general. Or out of the chat too.
I also wanted to just prop you on what you just said, Michelle, because it's right. It's not until the labor and the physical, like, showing up is required that it becomes inclusive, right? And speaking on representation earlier, it's like, how are we going to be represented throughout the whole process? and not taxed on when we're asked to show up to do the work. I appreciate you bringing that to the light, and thanks for all the shout outs to Texas, but we deal with a lot of duality, progress and opportunity, but then some deep rooted issues that have definitely come forward in so many facets.
I'll just add one thing on with regard to kind of education. There has to be a mindset shift, because I'm not a charity case. I know I've been telling people a lot about my business. I'm wanting to increase access to capital for women, and they're like, "Oh, is it a nonprofit?" I'm like, no. Women-owned businesses generate $1.7 trillion in sales. And I mean, this is a huge business opportunity. No, it's not a nonprofit. We are investable. I'm not your charity case. So there is a huge mindset shift that I think has to happen from thinking that when you're investing in you, that it's charity, or it's an ego boost for you. It's a PR stunt for you. No, I'm investable. I'm not a charity case.
I just wanted to add, I definitely agree with Christine as far as I'm not a charity case, but also too the pride and the stigma that comes along with that. Not only do you have issues with asking for money, asking for help, asking for the resources from other people, but also there's a stigma within our own community where you have to live a certain, accountability is accountability across the board, but even within our own, what's the best way to say it? I'm just going to say it how it is. Within our own community, it's a lot of restructuring and reorganization and rethinking that needs to happen as well, because I go back to a lot of things that I've experienced, either not the support that I needed to get started in business, or the support that was needed was based upon conditions. Like you said, Christine, what do they get in return? If it's a publicity stunt, or if they need a token, whatever the case may be, it's like I've fallen into those type of categories. But when it comes to needing something to grow my businesses, to grow my employees, or to grow my capital, to grow my portfolio, no one's there. So it is this double stigma, but it's also, we're doing it to ourselves to a certain degree as well.
I like what was said in the chat right now. It's a tax write-off, right? And that's the frustration there too. Is like going back to our glossary of terms. Like, why is something a tax write-off? To even know that it would be charitable, and that it's like a system being used against us and doubled down and used.
And one thing that I've experienced as well is that I think I said it in the chat as well. Feeling like I have to be twice as good to be on the playing field, and it really just kind of eliminating that mindset. Not saying that I'm not going to give 110%, but that doesn't mean that I have to feel, as though I have to be twice as good to play on the same field. And I'm not having that. I know if you put me up next to the next race course, I'll win every time. That's how confident I am in myself. It don't matter what color they are, none of that matters. But I just refuse going forward. And with doing a lot of soul searching in the past, that I'm not going to allow myself to feel that burden, because that's what it had became. It became a burden, trying to run a race, knowing that I was winning, but they made it look like I was losing. So, I'm not doing that anymore. Just a lot of soul searching that comes from that.
Yeah, I think our current state of economics and our current social structure requires us for the immediate time being to be outside of traditional structures. I know that the bank parking lot is where most Black people's business plans go to die, even when there's a Black bank manager or a Black face that you're dealing with. It doesn't do us any good to put a black face on systemic racism.
I would just
It
stop
doesn't
and
do any
get
good
gas
to
and
make
go to
sure
the
that the black person that I'm dealing with is reinforcing the institution's policies, which is one that doesn't support me moving forward in a financially stable way, which goes back to my original point about re-educating ourselves about how capital works and what's there for us and what's not there for us. And I think there's some people that are trying to move forward with a black agenda to help reinvest the wealth, the trillions of dollars of wealth that have been extracted from the black community, and to put that wealth back in the hands of black people and black communities. I created my business for the sole purpose of telling the stories of those people that have been written out of history. Through gaming, I can educate and entertain people at the same time. So I can give you the same information that's in a history book, but you absorb it over time. You absorb it over the course of playing the game. And that way it's not threatening to people. One thing that we realize is that even having this conversation that we're having right now is threatening to a certain group of people. It's an uncomfortable conversation. They don't want to have it. And if you're a black person or a brown person in the room, you automatically make them feel uncomfortable because they know that conversation may have to happen, right? And so we need to, I think about how we structure bringing resources, not just financial, because money can be taken away from you, but all the resources that you need to make sure that you're a success. So you don't have to work 3 times as hard to be considered half as good. I think that we as a community of entrepreneurs that are sticking our necks out here and taking a chance to start businesses. My business was created in Detroit because Detroit needed jobs, right? So yeah, I could have went out and left to go someplace else that would have been way more productive for me financially. But I knew that my success is built on the success of my community and whether or not we have access to employment. And instead of begging somebody else to do for me what I know that it's not in their interest to do, right? It's hard to get a man to understand something when his financial, when his paycheck depends on him not understanding it. And that's what happens when you go to banks and when you go to these other financial institutions that are not there to help you. They're there to extract wealth from you. And then the last stimulus just showed us that. What, $2.6 trillion put in the community and you got $1,200? That math don't add up. So this is from the top, from all the way at the very top of our financial structure to our neighborhood banks. Maybe we can get into credit unions, and maybe we need to think about restructuring our own financial institutions that think about black and brown people and making them successful, and not just how they can turn a buck off of us without putting anything back into the community. And my business is dedicated to making sure that women and people of color are portrayed in a positive light, and those stories that are being written out of history are written back in. And I think that one of those stories is the financial story of how money, since the day we came over here in black bodies, has been extracted from us, wealth has been extracted from us, and now it's time for atonement and for that money to be put back into those communities. And I'm just going to leave it there before I go off on something that I've been about.
This is not at all on this conversation. I wish we could talk for 7 more hours and just have a big long retreat. But I'd be remiss not to introduce Francesca. I think the even more important, but just the incredibly important issue of measurement and how we take this accountability, but how do we know we are accountable. So please, Francesca, take it away.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think, as I was listening to everybody, I was taking notes because I wanted to make sure that we start bringing it all together. And so one of the things that I talk about every chance I get is how entrepreneurship is a form of social activism. Entrepreneurship is a tool for empowering ourselves and for choosing which problems get solved, right? When I start a business, I am radically changing the status quo, which then gets us into a lot of this, like, what problem are you solving? That's not a problem, right? Because it's my definition of what the problem is. So right there, we are confronting the system in the bare act of starting a business. So that's kind of the backdrop to this concept of measuring impact. Measuring impact comes down to basically understanding human behavior, okay? And I'm going to break that down so that we can get into the panel discussion on the topic. Humans have thoughts that lead to feelings that lead to behavior. And this is the basis of marketing as a discipline. It is the basis of psychotherapy. It is what we all wish we could do, which is change how people think. We want to change how they feel, and we want to sometimes change their behavior when we're wanting them to choose our product over another, or to value something over something else that's more of a thought. We want them to feel excited about a thing. So you're saying, what does that have to do with impact? That's social impact. Our goal when we are forming social enterprises, or when we're trying to solve social problems, is in essence to affect change in people, in their minds, in their feelings, in their behaviors. So why is that critical to this concept of metrics? Because the metrics, the way you measure impact is not dollars. The way you measure impact is really by tracking the change that is happening inside people. And you can track that via behavior indicators, right? And we're going to get into that in a little while. But really understanding that when you're trying to change people, you cannot measure that with how much money did I make. You want that as well, but that is not how you measure social impact. Okay? So there are two tenets that kind of build or are the foundation for social impact investing. The first one is that investors in social impact must choose to invest in businesses that aim to solve problems that impact diverse populations. And so what that implies is not just race. We're talking about diversity in many ways. We're talking about problems that affect people perhaps differently, and that has to do with geography. It has to do with age. It has to do with illnesses, health issues that affect, for example, women and not men, and yet so much research goes toward men. It has to do with race also, okay? But that diversity of impact is something that is lacking because there's lack of diversity in investors. And so all the things that we've been talking about, the importance of representation, and the importance of accountability, lead to this issue of how do you even measure the difference, right? So the first thing they have to do is choose to solve problems that affect diverse populations. And so the second tenet is that investors in social impact ventures or investing in social impact ventures must become sophisticated social scientists. They have to understand how to create metrics by which they evaluate these businesses so that they know whether or not their money is making the difference in the world that they intended to make. So if that social scientist's mind is not present in that investor and all they're looking at is the financial aspect, they will miss the boat. Okay? There's so many things that are ingrained in my brain. I remember helping evaluate some social impact proposals for a funder that was. The point is that I'm here evaluating these applications, and one of the applications that we through is helping. It's a business in upstate New York that is helping wealthy families apply for very competitive kindergarten programs. And so they're doing this through a mobile app, and they're making it super easy for these wealthy families to connect and to prepare their kindergartners for an admissions process to competitive programs. That, using language that we heard here, was an investable business. Yet we have a business perhaps like Redenio or other types of businesses that are addressing issues of food injustice, for example, and they're bringing food to areas that do not have these kinds of resources, and that is seen as charity, right? So there is a fundamental difference in how we're defining problems and how we're categorizing problems that is impacting how things get measured and evaluated. So if you as entrepreneurs, and I want to put in a plug here, something that I think is important. At Black and Brown Founders, all of the top leadership is both an entrepreneur and a leader. So we all run our businesses as well. And that's so important for us because we want to be walking the walk and leading by example. So, but I won't speak as an entrepreneur today. I'm just speaking as director of education at EF. So my questions first to the entrepreneurs and then to the community at large is first, what social ill are you trying to solve? And I think that you guys have done a good job explaining that, but I would want it in a very succinct way so that we can answer question number 2, which is if you had a say in how to be evaluated by an investor, how would you want to be evaluated?
I'm happy to start that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I often see Verding as solving like a whole host of problems, not just who gets food, right, but we're a public benefit corporation of the social benefits of sustainability, public health, and food justice. And the fundamental problem we're solving is how do you get plants in people's, how do you get all the right stuff in people's hands so that they get to experience the magic of growing food and all the benefits that come with it. In many ways, we see ourselves as facilitators of the work that the plant does, rather than us necessarily doing the work ourselves. So I very much view us addressing some of those social ills. And then anytime I think about our success, I think about how can we scale that impact that plants have, right? And for us, that looks like how many people are we reaching, how many plants are we getting to new people, and not just that, but we're the only company out there that gives a damn about what happens afterward. And such a big part of our membership is, are you successful? Are you enjoying this? Are you understanding? Are you learning? Are you becoming independent? And so the other things I would like to be sort of evaluated on, aside from scale over time, to be scale, that's the impact direction I'm interested in, is it's also, are people learning? Are they growing personally? Are they being served by the plants and learning how to become even independent from us so that they start to not need, they want that reliance, or they want an engagement with us, but they don't need it with us anymore.
That's awesome. Okay, who else? I would love to hear. I'm always interested in how entrepreneurs, if given the chance, how would you want to be evaluated? How are you wanting to define success?
You want me to go? I'll go next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it would be 2 metrics that we measured by. The stories that we bring to African Americans that are being written out of our educational system. Because I know when I was in school, people like me only appeared 2 times. That was in 1865 and in 1965. Other than that, I was not in a history book, right? So there's a lot of history that happens in the Black community that is not passed on through our educational system, and the only way we can do that is through our oral traditions or through alternative media, right? So either you have a Black-owned bookstore in your community, and I'm trying to do it through this game. So if I can get information out and educate people, fine. And if my business is successful enough where I can hire people to do the work that I'm currently doing on my own, those would be my 2 metrics of success. By giving back to my community in that way, by being an example to other people that may come after me, that you can follow your passion and be socially conscious and give back to the community you live in. You don't have to leave and go to someplace else to be successful, that you can be successful from where you're at. Those would be my 2 metrics of success.
Thank you for sharing. Come on, people.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry about that. To piggyback off what Lee said, I've been away from home for a while, and so success with me would, essentially mean even me going back home to my own community, taking the experiences and things that I've learned while I was away, planting them in my community, in places where people know me and I know people and I know the families in the community, and just kind of growing something there, to where you can educate people that you know personally. Doing it from afar is a little bit harder, a little bit more work. Not running from the work, but for me, being in an area where you know people, you know the city, you know
people in different places. I think that for me, being able to go back home and grow, not only a business, but a community and an educational platform for, those Black boys that are 9, 10, 11 years old, help them get ahead and then steamroll this process to where they can be ahead sooner than I was. Because I believe that each generation has to be better than the next. So by doing that, you have to literally teach people early, teach them sooner than what you already, from the time that you learn. And so that's what the success will mean for me.
Okay, awesome. Carolyn?
Yeah, success for me, the metrics I'd love to be measured on is how much more parity and equity is there in the entertainment industry now that Film Connects is here. And so although we are happy to advocate for all film professionals, we are really intentional about helping to level the playing field for women and people of color who have been underrepresented for a very long time, above the line, below the line, in front of the camera, behind the camera. And so it matters, not just because they deserve the opportunity to learn trade and develop careers that are successful, but essentially what they're creating helps to really form the narrative for society. How we see ourselves is very much impacted by the media that we consume, by films, by TV shows, et cetera. And so knowing that our company brings about more equity, that would be the ideal metric for us.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone else want to add something before I kind of have a question for the group? Yes. Go ahead.
So equity, so at Positive Hire, what we do is connect experienced Black, Latina, and Indigenous women who are scientists, engineers, and technology professionals to management roles. So for me, just on the premise of that, is retaining more of that talent in those technical roles or in their careers, because while we're a small number, several of us, a large percentage of us, unfortunately leave. And so if I can at least retain more and then grow more, that is a huge success for me. Inside of that is positioning or placing Positive Hire in rural South Carolina to hire this talent here. And so I'm generating jobs, I'm improving revenue, and it is giving people an opportunity to then grow. And then third part of that is if I'm successful, then I'm able to say, hey, go out and build your own business so I can fund you. You seeded my business, let me seed yours. So it's not about me growing my tree, it is about my tree growing and being really fertilized here and being able to grow out a whole other orchard of trees so that we continue to grow and really build out rural areas with technical professionals, different service jobs, but definitely better than what you're getting paid at a Piggly Wiggly or a gas station and a Family Dollar.
I'll jump in. So it really comes down to generational wealth. So at Trauma Capital, providing capital, community, and coaching to women-owned businesses. And we know that when you invest in women, they invest in their families, they invest in their communities. And so a metric that I do know is that it's only about 2 to 3% of women-owned businesses that generate more than $1 million in revenue. So if we can bump that number up to a much higher percentage of our businesses that are bringing in more than $1 million in revenue, we know that's going to have impacts on families and communities. So it's really about generational wealth, being able to buy a new home, or just kind of invest in a community project. So asking those questions of the women on our platform have had to see whether we've been able to help generate generational wealth.
I think Lee also wants to add something.
Yes, the other lady. But I feel like we're literally the same person, just in different locations. Like, so I'm gonna steal his metrics, and then also for us, one of the things that we want to add is how do we, I know there's ways to measure it, but we want to be measured by the ways in which we are able to support reclaiming, revitalizing individual and collective sovereign knowledge systems. So it's how are we creating our own books that represent us? How are we creating our own comics that represent us? How are we creating our own games that represent us? Because if we can do that internally, then we now have the material to deliver that everywhere. So, and I think that, for me, I can see the metrics of that as like, yeah, it's going to depend on the number of books we get into everybody's hands. That's the goal. But it also starts because at a certain point we fall off a cliff because there's not enough material. So we also support the material creation of that within our sovereign systems, within our tribal nations.
I just love the sound of sovereign systems. That was so, yeah, I want that. I want more of that. I'm not sure how I'm doing with time, so Marina or somebody, you can tell me. I have one last thought, and then be a discussion.
Yeah, we can keep going. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you, Karina.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can't, this is getting into it, right? Like this is where we're going. So keep going because we still have plenty of time, and we're live streaming on our channels now. So we have some comments coming in from there. I think you're really hitting on, what we're going to reclaim and how we're going to measure and take it. And this is so important to hear from the entrepreneurs.
Cool. So here's the next layer to this, right? So these are the metrics that you each believe will best measure the progress and the success of your venture. This is a different perspective now. What thought, feeling, or behavior would need to change in the investor in order to align with those metrics you just stated?
For me, I think it takes a pretty systemic attitude shift at the level of pre-seed and seed around what is fundable or what is worthy of funding and what is validation. We've been able to secure some funding, but when we haven't, it's been, you're too early. When there are folks that they funded otherwise, and it's like, like my brother kind of knew somebody, things like that. So I think it takes a shift. Not, and I don't even say like just at like the funds level, because in some ways I don't always blame them because their fiduciary duty is on behalf of their LPs and whatnot. But I think at the angel level, on one-to-one level, I think that's where we can actually have the most change. And I think that's a shift in where one is supposed to be at the early stage, because we've achieved levels of traction that well beyond most folks who get X kind of funding these days. So. And I say that because without that sort of capital to lead to more capital over time, we won't be able to have the scale of how many people are we reaching out, how many plans are we putting in people's hands, are people learning? We just won't be able to operate. So it's kind of like, it might be kind of like sidestepping your question, just being like, we don't have the fuel, we can't get there. But yeah, I think that's the shift of just like, I'm willing to take a bet because I know that all of this is a huge bet anyway and has nothing to do with a meritocracy or numbers.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to call on people because I figured you're chewing on the questions.
Ladies first? No. What can be said that hasn't already been said? You have to have there is a vested interest in keeping the status quo. Mm-hmm. So the question becomes, how do you break up that status quo that includes people that are Black and brown and female, right? There was an event that we have every year, one of the largest gaming conventions called Origins. Maybe about 40 or 50,000 people show up at that convention. And they were going to have a panel, since we weren't convening, around Black Lives Matter because of what's happening in 2020. And so at the very last minute, that panel gets canceled after it had some of, the few heavy hitters in the gaming community. There were people of color and women. And then so Eric Lang, one of the top game designers, was asked, well, why was the panel canceled? And he just showed a picture of the board of directors, and there were just 15 white guys. Mm-hmm. That didn't want to have the conversation about being inclusive at their conventions, about including Black creators, about including female creators. They just didn't want to have it. So they decided just to cancel it. When the conversation was going to be amongst us, around what we can do as Black creators be represented. So whenever we leave our survival in the hands of people that don't have our interest, we are on perilous ground. And so I think changing the attitude of these people that we're not there to cut anybody's heads off. Everybody's here to make money. We just want to make money for people in our communities. We want to be able to stay in our communities. We won't have to chase them to San Francisco or New York in order to find funding and be able to get capital. I should be able to do that right in Detroit, Michigan. You know, I shouldn't have to leave to go to California or New York or Miami or Florida to be able to find people with money, because people with money are definitely hiding. You know, they're not putting themselves out there. You know, so I think that the shortest walk for me would be to create our own institutions and collaborate with people who become conscious and aware of what's happening and really want to see a change. But it can't be at the hands of, we can't be at the whim of other people. You know, we have to be driving that train.
If I could, Lee, I'd like to actually bring representation back into the conversation and have that kind of parallel to what Francesca's been speaking on with measurable impact, especially in your industry. I mean, you just called it out right now, because there was something that was canceled because there wasn't representation.
We weren't there. There was no Black people making decisions, right? You know, we're there when they need people to volunteer. We're there when they need people to fold tables. We're there when we need people to man doors and work security. Find the biggest Black guy you can and stick him at that door. When it comes time to making decisions about who should be at the table and who should be having the conversation, we're not there, right? That's being made by somebody else. So again, as long as we leave that decision to people that aren't us, those decisions are going to continue to be made, because once again, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on him not understanding it. So we either have to force that understanding, or we have to create parallel systems that validate our right to be in those spaces. You know, I'm going to leave it there because
No, it's good. It's good. That's you know, I think we need to speak on that, and I really appreciate you being vocal, and because it needs to be said and be reminded in so many forms. Francesca, if you could go back to measuring impact. One thing that kind of sparred this conversation was, what is impact to us and the community that we are a part of? And what does that look like when we actually see it? And so I'm curious, from the entrepreneurial aspects and their viewpoint, what does that impact look like when it's being done? And our IG Live with Involve earlier, I like how James asked the question, like, are we there yet? You know, are we seeing that change? And I had to take a deep breath, because I can't confidently say yes and no. You know, I can say we're getting there, or we're moving in that direction. And it's also because you know, as a co-working space, as you know, a membership base, I get to see perspectives from many different avenues, and collectively I could say that we're getting there, but we're definitely not there.
So I'm curious, are you talking specifically about access to venture capital and measuring impact that way? Because I think that where I was going with my line of questioning is precisely to highlight the fact that the metric to determine if we're making an impact is determined by the solution to the problem, right? So that is where we need to focus, and that's where the re-education happens. In some cases, I think that we, and I'm speaking out to us, you know, people of color, indigenous communities, women, sometimes we think that the way that we define success is I got funded. right? And however, that is in some ways pimping ourselves, because what did we give up in that transaction, right? What was it that we had to compromise in order to get those dollars? Did we have to move us away from something that was more niche and that focused on a very specific problem that we wanted to fix in order to get dollars that now have a different, right? And so I want to be careful in answering that question. I think that the progress to be made, and this is, me and my radical position, so I'll give an opinion, and it's part of the conversation. But this is why we are about the bootstrapping. This is why we actually want to say, do not pursue venture capital until there are enough fruits in your business that they're not going to be swaying you away from that mission, from those metrics that you set out to achieve, right? And so I think when we do that more effectively, and we show the world that we can succeed in the pursuit of these new metrics and these new problems to be solved, when we show that we are investable, they will be chasing us because they want the dollars, right? But I am perfectly okay not pursuing dollars and growing organically so that we can build that ecosystem. I love what Gaddy's, is that how you pronounce your last name? He was talking about, I'm translating your words to mine, but, some sort of the self-serving enterprise. We are serving our community, and we are drawing from our community and putting back into our community. I want to see that. That to me is measurable impact. If my goal is to change the mind of a white male investor somewhere so that he can believe the things I believe, I think that kind of, I would have to set out to do that. That would be my organization, and my purpose would be that would be my impact, right? Is to change the minds, behaviors, and feelings of white male investors. And I think I don't care enough. They're going to do what they're going to do. And they're either going to die little by little. I don't know what's going to happen, right? Did I say that out loud? Here's my thing. I want us, again, to just detach from let me rephrase. The change I want to see in our thoughts and feelings and behavior is an empowerment to believe that we can do it without.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
Let me jump in.
spoke too
Yeah.
much.
There we go, Lee. Please.
Just very quickly, so I think that part of that is both an external, and I'm seeing some of the comments, and it's what sort of shaped this is an indigenous philosophy is not a linear philosophy. It's a cyclical, it's a circle, right? And not to essentialize native thinking to be all mystical or whatever, but it's this idea that the way, we keep using these concepts of sustainability, but a lot of it, it's reorienting everyone, including ourselves, that we're working in a circle, we're working in a spiral, we're working in these multiple ways, not a linear. It's not a means to an end. It's like I start a business, I cash out over here, because that's really what VC is looked at, right? It's last money in, first money out. I'm looking at being your first money in, last money out, and then you're going to get the next group. You're going to help fund the next group come in. So I think a lot of the work that needs to be done, it's both internal and external, right? We've got to keep in mind that we use these business terms, but really, when we say sustainability, it's really about cyclical thinking. It's really coming back to the fact that we're saying and this is not for everybody. I don't want to, there's some folks being nope, I'm cool. I'm going to go from point A to point B. I'm going to get out and I'm going to use that money. I'm going to throw it into my family and do whatever we do. And that's the brilliance of what we get to be as an ecosystem of entrepreneurs of color. But I think there is a part for many of us that work, within our home communities and not wanting to leave those home communities and not wanting to sort of chase the train of saying that's I think part of the underpinning. And I don't necessarily know if I have an answer for the longer stuff, but that underpinning, that philosophical dynamic is that it's, that we exist in this circle, we exist in this spiral. I like the spiral because it's kind of an action symbol. It's kind of constantly moving. And that goes back to Pueblo peoples. We have lots of spirals. So,
actually, Lee, I love that you brought up a a term that we could actually define, sustainability. And if we're able to capture that, and one of the actions that we want to pull away from this conversation is the terminology and reclaiming that language. So if everyone else is comfortable, I'd like to hear from each entrepreneur if there was one word that you would like to either define, or you would like for us to have a collective dialogue to define it from our own perspectives.
I would like to say reinvestment, right? There are people, generations of people who made investments in me and my community to make sure that I thrived and survived, matriculated through school, survived in my community, stayed away from drugs, got on the good path. But we were trained to work. We were trained to get jobs. We weren't trained to own businesses, right? That's the education that I got. But through outside people who are activists, who raised my consciousness about my community, and said that you could do something more than the system
I'm in the middle of
has
an
educated
event. That's
you
why I
for,
answered.
right? So those people made those investments in me.
Yes.
I would like to reinvest that
I'm
same
in
amount
my
of energy
event right now,
they
so
put
I
in me
answered because of
back
that.
into
But
the
thank
community
you.
for
You
the
can
next
text me though.
generation.
Thank
To
you.
Lee's
Bye.
point about a circle, it's about reinvesting back the energy, the time, the effort, the resources that community gave to me, and putting it back in that community so that community can thrive and grow, right? So reinvestment would be my word that I would like to define, because many, many people put time, energy, and effort into me, and I will reinvest that time, energy, and effort back into the community that I grew from, and not enrich another community that's already overly wealthy with my time, talents, and resources. And I will leave it there.
I love that. So we have sustainability, reinvestment. Darius, I'm going to call on you to get other entrepreneurs to come forward if you'd like.
Yes. Again, with Lee, just reinvesting back into the community, and just really each one teach one, continue and to really just be a voice and a representation for those who didn't have it, because I didn't have it, so I had to create it. And so by realizing that and knowing that you can go back and be that representation, for those that are kind of coming behind you, I think that will work, and I think that will help us get ahead as we continue to move forward.
I'd love to just surface a conversation that's happening in chat, and it may drift a little bit. So there's the question of, because there's a thought of like, oh, you should just bootstrap, you shouldn't raise VC or anything like that, and so I think that I'm very open and very in tune with the systemic and manifold issues within VC and the toxic culture that is in much of it. That said, I'm interested in impact, and I'm interested in scaling the amount of people that get plans and the people that can have that experience. If I bootstrap I'm bootstrapping right now, and I'm on unemployment, y'all, and I have consumer goods. We have to have physical costs, right? We took out a 6K credit, from Chase, right? If you're a tech company, bootstrapping makes a little bit more sense if you have technical ability yourself. You can kind of hustle your way into clients. But businesses like mine, we need to be able to afford to have the capital to understand customer acquisition costs, to build an engine, right? We can't do that on hustle, because we've done that and we don't learn enough. We're not getting far enough. And so I want to, and that doesn't mean necessarily we need VC. We need funding. VC is one channel for funding, sure. But I think that when we think about scale and impact, we can try and play outside the system, but we're going to be playing down here for too long. I'm not interested. I'm interested in being the Blue Apron for gardening, but bigger and more responsible and sustainable, right? But that's the level of brand impact I want to have. And everybody has their own scale, and no place on the scale is wrong. But my scale is as big as it can be, not just because it drives the impact of what I'm trying to accomplish, but because then that allows us to then get the capital to then be able to reinvest in the community, right? If I'm serious about helping my community. I want to be able to make this as big as possible, get as big as returns as possible, to then reinvest into the community, right? And so, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, exactly what you're saying with the spiral, right? But, so yeah, I think I just want to like call out that like, I think there's even all my friends in general social justice, there's this thought, well, maybe we can find our peace and harmony in private, right? We don't have to work within the system. I think that's fine. And in fact, I may like run away and like start a homestead, you know, that may happen. But I think that if some of us, and I think it's all of the above, don't go head into the beast and say, I'm going to win this game because the returns can be tremendous impact, tremendous capital for our communities, then I think if we actively avoid that, we're certainly not changing the system, right? And we're always going to be operating in a spiral down here rather than the bigger spirals that create bigger yields. So that's I wanted to share that perspective.
So I'd like to hear from Ingrid next. And I want to clarify something. The idea is not never VC. The idea is the right funding at the right time. So Ingrid?
Sorry, I had to clear my throat there. I'm like, holy crap, how did I get in the room with Dodo? Oh my God. I'm freaking out right now. I only know her from Twitter. This is awesome. Okay, so here's what I have to say. Number one, there are some companies that will grow faster and really need VC capital. There are absolutely folks who need VC money, and not all of them get it. Some of them need it and some of them don't get it. And so when I said, Roman, that's total BS, that's what I was thinking of. We are not in some meritocracy. That's complete and total bullshit. Because if there wasn't a bias of any kind, then maybe, but no. So yeah, no. So some people need it for good reasons. They need it. They need to grow fast. And they don't get it. They don't get it. They're over I don't get that. Well, learn. Like Google that mess, dude. They don't. They wear the vest and they keep going. Okay. Number two, there are some people that there's some, okay, when you define success, and if it doesn't have anything to do with money, fantastic. Fantastic. If it has to do with relationships and sleeping at night and what you're working on, the projects that are on your plate, awesome. If that's success, great. But that's the word that I think we need to help younger people define for themselves, so that as they grow, then it grows around that core understanding of what they think success is. It's not getting an A. Like, don't commit suicide over not getting an A. Nobody cares. Like, if you graduate high school, that's great. Nobody cares if you got an A in chemistry 20. Like, really? Like, please, don't slit your wrist over that. Okay. So I've almost given up on adults, but okay. So I have a tendency to, because I teach an after-school program, I believe in college students and younger people who have not yet figured out what is their superpower, what is their gift, what is their strength, their suit, their lane. I'm all about helping them figure that out and feel through it. It has nothing to do with getting an A. And they need to, like, everybody needs to get that. And there are not enough touch points, encouragement for people to fail. Okay, my parents are immigrants. They're Jamaican immigrants, and they have a lot of education. But it was like, hey, no, there's no try. You only do. It's like, did Darth Vader say that? Anyway, Yoda or somebody. Just there aren't enough touch points to understand that failure is part of the journey. If you never fail, you're gonna get some entitlement growing off you, dude. Like, it's gonna hurt when you finally do fail. When you finally do fall in your face, it's gonna hurt more. So just figure out how that's part. So when it comes to redefining things, okay. Sustainability is kind of like the buzzword of the year. I don't know. Logistics is another one. I don't know. but not everybody needs it, and the ones that do need it don't always get it. And if anybody's defining anything, we need to help young people define stuff. That's it.
Yeah, I do want to be conscious of our time. Thank you for those words, Ingrid. We're moving on to 7 p.m. So I'm not sure if Corinna or Francesca had a closer before we finish up. Are you guys good?
I'm good. I think our entrepreneurs said all that needed to be said.
Okay, great. To give a little bit of an introduction, I'm James Banks. I'm a program manager with Involve, and I've been somewhat of the social media voice for this event. So I have the tough job of closing us out and summing up some of the amazing things that were said this evening. But before I do that, I want to thank everyone who tuned in today to witness this powerful event. As Corinna put it, it was beautiful to watch a lot of us bring our strengths and passions to the table to quickly make this event come to life. I want to thank our partners, Max from Generation Titans, of course, Corinna from Splash, Francesca and Deldel from Black and Brown Founders for all their help, dedication, and consistency this week. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the entrepreneurs, for being you, mainly. You guys are the soul of this event. We deeply appreciate your time and allowing us to be somewhat of a megaphone for your success and perseverance through the entrepreneurial space. So again, I want to thank you, Carolyn, Lee, Roman, Michelle, Ravika, Christine, the other Lee Francis, and Darius. I hope I got everyone. You guys are truly amazing, and I appreciate this on a deeper level because this close to the holidays, these kinds of real conversations are what I was raised on. People in the community coming together, not afraid to address, the elephants in the room for the betterment of the community. And I'm sure if we weren't in this pandemic, we would have been able to have a discussion like this over a meal, maybe prepared by Ramika, compliments of Romans or organic produce. I'm also sure if we were in Texas, Darius could have given me a fresh fade for this event. I haven't gotten a cut in a while, so that would have definitely been helpful. But I say that to say, this is what it's about, building community and amplifying your voices and abilities and journeys. This is what I signed up for, and frankly, I think because of this event, this makes all of us family. You guys can't really do anything about that. That's just how it's going to be. For some of the housekeeping things that I want to touch on before I let everyone go, some of the products that we did want to come out of this that have been really the focal point of this event is the glossary we touched on earlier, which is like a glossary of shared language. This was the drive behind the name Decolonizing Capital. Developing and nurturing a shared language is essential to enhancing communication and collaboration, which we have amongst ourselves and in our communities. But we need to kick in those doors of these funds and those boardrooms so the misrepresentation stops and the real progress begins. And we get more than the hashtag diversity that was brought up earlier from these executives and chairmen who are predominantly white males. So we will be reviewing this event and working on getting that out to you all. Thank you, Corinna, from Splash again for that wonderful idea. What else am I missing? Also, I want to bring to everyone's attention the call of action document we circulated. This is another action we can take to further support the entrepreneurs that joined us today. Many of them are expanding and relaunching and supporting their communities. And this event is all for nothing if we can't support some of their small asks. And that's bottom line. And that's something Talani touched on in the opener. We will be incorporating that into our giving narrative coming up, and we will send that around to everyone. But I think to close out, I want to leave you guys with a quote from an idol of mine, not a very popular name, and Angela Davis, where she said, the process of empowerment cannot be simplistically defined in accordance with our particular class interests. We must learn to lift as we climb. And I'll say that last part again. We must learn to lift as we climb. So take that with you, and may it serve as a synopsis of what we tried to achieve today when we talked about representation, accountability, and of course, measurable impact in the entrepreneurial space. It's about elevating the true narrative, of course, and making these financial institutions and boards and funds uncomfortable or comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, to kind of pull it all together. The revolution will not be televised. So again, I want to thank everyone watching at home for joining us. I also want to say happy Thanksgiving, since we won't be able to see you all. Enjoy your time with your family. And I will say one more thing, I hate to be a stickler, but I know times are tough right now, but a Zoom Thanksgiving is better than an ICU Christmas. So protect yourselves, stay healthy mentally and physically. And another very big thank you to everyone. We appreciate your time. And this was such a powerful experience for me personally. So again, thank you. Much thanks. And I think that'll close us out if we don't have any more words. Thank you guys. Goodbye. Be well.